Well, hi, fellow travelers. Welcome back. This chapter's a fun one. It's also a long one, and I'm mentioning that because I made a terrible mistake. Don't ever do this. I checked the YouTube analytics, and it turns out that the average viewing time of these videos is about half the length of the video. And I was like, what? Not that I'm insulted, I like to know the endings of things. That would drive me crazy. That would drive me nuts. So anyway, if you're averse to, longer videos, got bad news for you on this one. Okay, welcome to Chapter 19, Jiggery-pokery, December 29th, 2003. Hello, readers. I can still recall back when I was with the producers. I had just been offered Les Miserables, and seasoned tour veteran and fellow cast member Michael Goddard was going over my itinerary with me. Okay, Kostroff, what do we got? Well, let's see. We opened in Atlanta. Fabulous, beautiful theater. Be sure to eat at Gladys Knight's restaurant. Okay, then Dayton, Cleveland again. What can you do? Go on. Springfield, Greenville, Memphis, all fantastic. Boston, sublime, you'll love it, great audiences. Then what? Detroit, and that's when he turned white. And he pointed an instructive finger at me and charged Kostroff. Do not stay downtown. Stay in the suburbs and commute. That bad? Kostroff, trust me. Stay out of Detroit. Indeed, I learned from others that according to common touring knowledge, Detroit was infamously bleak, not to mention dull, maybe even dangerous. It's the city no touring actor wants to see on his itinerary. And we were headed there for Christmas. So for the 4 weeks that we played Detroit's Fisher Theater, I did what most of the cast of Les Mis did and signed up for the Marriott Residence Inn in Southfield, about 20 minutes outside of the dreaded metropolis. The company shuttled us back and forth between the hotel and the theater, and all was well. I really don't mean to sound like a commercial, but I love Residence Inns. The buildings are laid out complex style, and each room is like a studio apartment with a sofa and two nice big closets, a full kitchen, sometimes even a fireplace and a small balcony. They set you up with pots and pans and everything. It's pretty homey for a hotel room. And since it was now the very dead of winter, and I mean the very dead, a fireplace was a godsend. Oh, you bet your ass I scored one. And so, happily, I saw very little of you-know-where, with the exception of the day that I visited the Motown Historical Museum. That was the one local site I had to visit. I was one of those white kids who grew up on black music, so visiting Motown was like a religious pilgrimage for me. I took the tour. I drank in every photo and every caption on every wall and stood with great reverence in the famous Studio A, the very recording studio where many classic soul recordings were made by the likes of The Temptations, Gladys Knight and the Pips, and Stevie Wonder. And I was in awe. You can't imagine. I grew up on this music. It was really something to be there where it all happened. And I learned something surprising and rather moving about Motown. In a time when it was still rare, Motown was an interracial company. They'd hire anybody who understood the music. They didn't care what color he was. And so even in the very early days of the civil rights movement, they practiced their own form of anti-segregation, hiring several white employees. And everyone worked successfully side by side, making that great music together. It's beautiful, huh? Other than that, and the occasional mall trip, most of us were perfectly content to just hunker down at the hotel. And so, miles from the city with little to do, the Residence Inn became its own cozy community. We had little dinner parties and Scrabble games. We watched DVDs together, shared provisions, hung out, and kept warm, thanks to the good people at the Duraflame Log Company. One afternoon, shortly after emerging from my front door, I felt a sudden crush of coldness against the back of my neck. What the hell? I looked around. Nothing. Then, from behind the bush, I heard the unmistakable cackle of a little girl. Suddenly, another object whizzed past me from another direction, accompanied by a delighted shriek from around the corner of a building. Snowballs! Oh, the gauntlet had been thrown down. This was war. I started scooping and packing for all I was worth as the four little Les Mis urchins scrambled from their hiding places and ran for their lives, screaming bloody murder. We chased each other all through the complex, hurling our frozen ammunition, laughing, gasping, I more than they, in a spontaneous eruption of late afternoon activity. I'd like to boast to you of my total and merciless victory over the helpless tots. But the little buggers were quick, and I'm afraid I took more than my share of snow fire. God bless these little guys, they keep us all young. The Fisher Theater had been host to Les Mis before, and the local crew members loved the show, except for its length. Every night, while Jean Valjean sang the haunting Bring Him Home, a second-act classic that never fails to bring tears to audiences' eyes, followed by a long, healthy stretch of applause, this one surly old dresser broad used to cry out as she paced the length of the downstairs dressing room area, "Oh, Lord, please bring his ass home already." All in all, it turned out to be a surprisingly nice run. One Sunday morning, I woke with a powerful sense of not wanting to go to work. And it seemed foreign to me. I don't usually feel that way. But you know how sometimes when you're not quite awake, you tap into your true feelings unedited and in that semi-conscious state, unencumbered by morality or ethics? This was one of those moments. Well, Michael, I thought as I returned to my reasonable adult self, you may not feel like going to work today, but it's Sunday, and we have 2 shows today, and as far as I know, you're in both of them. So you'd better get up and get going. Tough it out. I mean, you have to go, and that's all there is to it. Right? And yet the powerful urge persisted. I got up, I rubbed my eyes, I made coffee, and I assessed the situation. I wasn't sick, so calling out would be unethical. And yet, the idea was suddenly so deliciously illicit. What to do? I opened the drapes and I took a quick inventory. Outside, it was snowing, windy, gray, and bleak. Inside, it was cozy, warm, and light. I had a fireplace, a full box of Duraflame logs, a television, a sofa, and a cupboard full of food. I thought a bit longer. Snow, wind, cold, wet, 2 shows. Nope, I'm just not seeing it. And I did it. Oh, readers, I blush to tell you. I indulged. I called out sick. It's so not like me. And I felt wicked and wrong until I hung up the phone. And suddenly I was sure it was the only possible choice for that particular day. It was perfect. I took a mental health day. That's an unofficial term for calling out sick when you're physically fine, but really, truly can't see going to work. Yeah, like you've never heard of that. And trust me, a mental health day works like a charm. I stayed in my pajamas, kept the fireplace going all day long, watched TV, took 2 baths, and cooked delicious food for myself. It was sinfully good. If I remember correctly, I believe there was even an Entenmann's pecan Danish ring involved. Well, naturally. Shouldn't there always be an Entenmann's pecan Danish ring involved? The fact is, as the months and the cities start to rack up, theater folk do tend to get restless and start bending the rules a little bit. And the temptations seem to be even greater in stops like Detroit, where there's a lack of entertainment and perhaps a dip in the fun factor. And by temptations, I don't mean the famous Motown singing group, though some say they were greater in Detroit too. In fact, the Mental Health Day is among the more innocuous indulgences. Others can be fairly unethical and even downright unprofessional, and yet, here, gentle reader, I feel I must pause. Do I go on and reveal the awful truths of my profession? Do I burst the bubble for those innocents among you? After all, full disclosure isn't always best. There are some things it's better not to know, like what exactly is inside those delicious Chinese dumplings we all enjoy so much, or what therapists really think of us, or whether our president is having highly personal marital problems. Along those lines, I've had quite a heated debate with myself back and forth about this next bit because it contains scandalous expositions. You see, we stage actors sometimes do things on stage that aren't meant for the audience to see. Silly things. Terrible, shamefully unprofessional things. Things we probably should never tell you about because they're wrong and awful and terribly, terribly not right. Nevertheless, damn it, they make for some funny stories. And while I wholeheartedly believe that the actual doing was wrong, I maintain that the telling is not. Besides, it's either that or I write about all the fun things to do in downtown Detroit, and I'm pretty sure we've already exhausted that topic. And so it is with the utmost hypocrisy that I regale you with the following amusing tales of onstage shenanigans that happen when, we hope, no one is looking. Les Mis is a particularly dark show, both thematically and literally. Often we're upstage, buried in smoke and semi-shadow, and it's there where we get into the most trouble. Those shadows are hotbeds of temptation to fool around and try to make each other laugh. Early in the show, Jean Valjean, the hero of Les Mis, steals some silver from a kindly bishop, but he's caught by the police and hauled back to the bishop's house for questioning. A crowd gathers in the bishop's doorway. They watch in awe as the bishop tells the guards to release Valjean, saying that the silver was a gift. In addition, he gives Valjean a set of silver candlesticks, charging him to use the money to become an honest man. That crowd formation in the doorway is what we in the show call the Devil's Playground. The audience is watching Valjean, the bishop, and the guards. Why would they watch us? We're just a crowd. So who'd notice if someone were, for example, to tie two people's costumes together, which happens at least once a week, or if someone were to casually mention that her water just broke, or worse. Shortly before the bishop gives Valjean the candlesticks, one cast member was fond of whispering this ad lib to the group. "As long as he doesn't give him the candlesticks, I could take anything but that. Please God, anything but the candlesticks." Well, of course, we all knew what was coming. The bishop would hand Valjean the candlesticks, and we'd all chuckle as we heard our friend mutter in a faint, shaking voice, "Oh, God, no." One guy used to always try to sell me his sister. Another liked to lean his full weight on the last person in the clump and try to topple the lot of us. Some would just peer through the crowd at this filthy convict, this dirty-faced animal in rags, and shake their head and say, "Every night it's the same thing. Some criminal running through the streets with the bishop's silver. That's it. We're moving to another neighborhood." Most of the cast is in the factory scene, a group of nameless, faceless employees. A fight breaks out, and Jean Valjean himself comes in to break it up, admonishing, "What is this fighting all about? Will someone tear these two apart? This is a factory, not a circus." Well, one cast member loved turning to whoever was nearby and reacting in shock at this last bit of information, as if she'd been under the false impression that she was indeed working at a circus. "Damn it," she'd say. "They told me this was a circus. Bastards." This evolved. Eventually, two of the men had a nightly bet going, and when the news came out that this was in fact a factory and not a circus, one had to hand over his day's wages, furious that he'd once again been duped into believing he'd been working under the old big top. Even Jean Valjean got involved. Every once in a while, he'd turn on them and point for emphasis as he sang, "This is a factory, not a circus." And then there was Chenet night. Chenet is a ballet turn. It's hard to describe in print, but it's like stepping quickly and smoothly in a circle with your arms out in front of you. It's a common step in ballet, not quite so common in epic musicals. There are, in fact, no chenets in the choreography for Les Mis, but every once in a while someone would declare it Chenet night, and performers would look for as many opportunities as possible to insert this absolutely inappropriate and incongruous move into their onstage business, ideally with enough subtlety, or at least speed, that the audience would never spot anything out of place. So people would chenet during the chase scenes, or while gathering citizens to fight at the barricade, or even sometimes, if they were very, very creative, during their own deaths. Shameful, yes. But then again, I did warn you. Now, at first, I was absolutely appalled by the lack of actual acting going on in the ensemble of Les Mis. But it was only a matter of time until eventually, and I'm ashamed to tell you, I gave way. During a drive between cities, Shahara and I had stopped for a bite at a fast food place. It was in the middle of the night, in the middle of who knows where, and we were both really punchy from the many hours of driving and giggling and having no idea where we were. As we placed our order, both of us glanced casually at each other, registering the fact that we'd both noticed our cashier's eyebrows. They'd been completely plucked clean and replaced by two perfectly semicircular lines way too high on her forehead to even suggest actual eyebrows. It was like a pair of arches on her head, as if she were subliminally advertising another better-known fast food chain. As she left to get our food, I turned to Shahara. "Don't look at me," she warned, fighting laughter with all her might. "But Shahara, I want to tell you something very important," I said, curving my finger and holding it to my forehead. "I'm not looking at you. I hate you," she chuckled. Minutes later, we stumbled out with our food, laughing so hard we had to sit down on the curb. A few nights later, on stage in a crowd scene, I caught Shahara's eye, and fixing my gaze on her, I slowly pushed up my knit cap, revealing two perfect semicircles I had drawn onto my forehead in eyebrow pencil. She stared at the floor and whispered, "I hate you, Kostrov," stifling a giggle. I casually replaced my cap and returned to the scene. In my big number, Master of the House, I greet and serve customers who are visiting my inn. One of my props is a small pad of paper which hangs around my neck on a long, thin strip of leather. I use it to take orders and write out bills. From time to time, I like surprising my fellow actors with little messages for their amusement. One night, someone lost her shoe in the factory scene. I don't know how it happened, and I can't fathom why no one picked it up and got it back to her, but there it sat, center stage, while people walked around it. And then, to get it out of the way, someone had the bright idea to place it on a box, which didn't help at all. It looked like an advertisement for a local shoe store. I'm sure every eye in the theater was strained on that little lone shoe, wondering where it would end up. Finally, Cinderella found an opportunity to grab the damn thing and put it back on her foot, but by then I'm sure everyone had noticed. So when it came time for my tavern scene, I distributed bills to my customer that read, "Our policy, no shoes, no service." They were a step ahead of me. Several of them had already taken off one shoe each and placed them on the table. Cindy Benson, who plays my wife, had a brief eye irritation, so I forgot about this. So she was permitted to wear an eye patch on stage for about a week. The first night she performed wearing the patch, my message read, "If anyone has seen my wife's eye, please return it. No questions asked." But some of the pad pranks took real investment on my part. At the top of the scene, several customers enter and shout their orders to me. They sing, "Come on, you old pest, fetch a bottle of your best. What's the nectar of the day?" Well, one night, Gina, who has the first solo, was slightly late singing the line. It wasn't the kind of thing anyone in the audience would notice, but we who sing the show every night pick up on anything that's even the tiniest bit different. So we all smirked, teasing her for having to catch up with the music. That's what we do. "Sorry about that," said Gina later. "Oh, it's nothing. I hardly noticed," I replied. During an offstage break, I strolled jauntily to the stage manager's office with mischief in mind. "Hello there. Have you a copy of the score?" I asked. As luck would have it, they did. "I'll bring this right back." And off I went to the company manager's office with his copy machine. I turned it to the page that contained Gina's solo, and I made a copy. Then I cut it down to the size of one of my bills. I took a highlighter pen and highlighted her lyric, "Come on, you old pest," and taped the page onto my prop pad. Then I waited. I waited for what felt like an eternity. It was a Sunday night, so I wouldn't have the chance to present it to her on stage until Tuesday, and I couldn't tell anyone for fear of ruining the gag. It was torture. Finally, Tuesday came. I waited till my scene, and then during the first group chorus, I slapped the bill down on the table in front of her, and as I danced merrily away, I heard that entire side of the stage scream with laughter behind me, which fortunately is absolutely appropriate to the scene. But I think my favorite of the Thénardier Inn pad of paper pranks was the night we were saying goodbye to Robert Hunt, a talented and very well-liked cast member. After many years with Les Mis, he decided to leave to star in a production of Jekyll and Hyde. We wanted to give him an extra special Thenardier Inn send-off, so several of us brainstormed until someone came up with the perfect idea, and we spread the word throughout the cast so everyone would know what to do when the time came. Shortly after arriving in the tavern, I presented Robert with a bill. It read, "Tonight's special, Dr. Jekyll's brew. 1 sip makes you evil, 1 sip makes you good. Take a look around, we're all drinking it." Sure enough, cast members had all been instructed to flip back and forth between good and evil every time they took a sip of their drink, and they really went for it. Without missing a note of the song, they portrayed the most dazzling display of group schizophrenia the stage has ever seen. In fact, the scene was more energized and more focused than I'd seen it in months. It was like an acting class exercise. My tavern was a madhouse that night. As for Robert, he couldn't stop smiling. Later, he said it was the best going-away present he'd ever gotten. For her send-off from the show, Lois, who isn't a member of the cast, was granted a special honor. She got to die on the barricade. It's a Les Mis tradition, albeit an unkosher one. They got her a costume and sneaked her into the crowd for the final battle scene, and she joined the revolutionaries in their slow-motion death. Being a ham at heart, she milked it for all it was worth. No one in the audience that night knew that they were seeing an extra dying French person, but it was a hoot for those of us in the show. Now, not all of the laughter-inducing moments are deliberately instigated. Sometimes things just go wrong in funny ways. Mistakes, slips. They usually happen when we get too comfortable. It never fails. Just when a performer feels he's got the show down and he knows what he's doing, he makes the mistake of relaxing. And that's when he's most vulnerable to the theater goblins that bewitch his tongue, addle his brain, and mock his confidence. I remember one night in the producers, I ran backstage during Springtime for Hitler, just as I did every night, for one of my 4 quick costume changes within the number. My dresser was looking at me strangely. "What?" I asked hurriedly. "Are you usually here this early?" she asked. I was annoyed by the stupidity of the question. "Yes, this is when I..." And that's when I heard someone on stage singing what was supposed to be my solo line. And there I was backstage, dressed as a tap-dancing Winston Churchill, when I was supposed to be on stage dressed as a Nazi stormtrooper. I was furious with myself for about 30 seconds, and then I had to laugh and let it go. Nothing I could do about it at that point. After months and months on the road, and hundreds of performances of the same show, during which the whole thing consistently ran like clockwork, my brain had decided just this once to make an unscheduled left turn smack dab into a wall. Reliably, not only did the cast cover my mistake, but later they made sure to give me a hard time about it. "You gonna join us for the whole number tonight, Kostroff? Should we call a stormtrooper rehearsal for you? You have any other solos you want me to pick up? Hey, Kostroff, can you do my tap combination tonight? I want to get a head start on my costume change." Again, it's what we do. Among the most famous mistakes in the folklore of Les Mis is one that happened long before I joined the show. The villain of the piece, the intensely legalistic Inspector Javert, has infiltrated the rebel camp, claiming to be for their side. At this point in the show, he's just returned, he claims, from spying on the enemy. Following a tense, exciting, staccato musical introduction, he very rapidly gives his report. He sings, "Listen, my friends, I have done as they said. I have been to their lines. I have counted each man. I will tell what I can." Well, as the legend goes, one night, the actor playing Javert just went up. Footnote. Going up is theater slang for forgetting your lines. If you're in rehearsal and an actor says, "Sorry, I'm up," it means he needs a stage manager to look up the line in the script and call it out. No such luck if you're in performance. So he just went up on all those words. And so it came out something like this. "Listen, my friends, I have been to their homes. I have watered their plants. I have fed all their cats. I have read all their mail." People who were there swear it's a true story. Well, things happen. And God help you if you're on stage when a fellow performer loses it. It's hard not to laugh. I still find it very strange that we can be so comfortable in front of an audience of thousands that we actually become distracted from the task at hand, but it happens. Sometimes it's just another night at the office, and as can happen with any job, our minds are occasionally on other things, and sometimes we just plain space out. When I was with the producers, I'd find myself in the very same spot every night, around 10:45 p.m. high up on a stool behind my fake judge's bench in the midst of the courtroom scene. It's rather a long scene, and I only had a few lines. Mostly I just sat there listening. I listened to Max plead his case. I listened to Leo plead Max's case, and then I listened while they both sang about it. Had you seen the show in month 6 or 7, you would have seen a judge who was deep in thought, seriously considering options. But if you could have listened in on my thoughts, you might have been surprised by what those options were. Let's see. I have a can of soup back at the hotel. That's not too bad. Or I could make a salad. What the hell? Taco Bell on the way home. Or maybe some of us will go out to eat. Nah, Taco Bell. Screw it. The night of the Tony Awards, Les Miserables was in, who remembers what city? Fort Worth. That's it. Anyway, there was a television set tuned to the broadcast at a very low volume, I swear to you, about 10 feet from the down left entrance to the stage. 10 little feet from all those singing Frenchmen. Whenever we weren't on stage, we were huddled around the set straining to hear. Some members of the ensemble were even able to position themselves in such a way that they could see the TV screen from the stage. Can you imagine? Thousands in the audience, and they're sneaking peeks into the wings to see who won Best Use of Taffeta in a musical. Well, to be fair, the broadcast was particularly exciting this year because our own director, Jason Moore, was up for a Tony Award for his direction of the hit Broadway musical Avenue Q. Jason is a fantastic director, and we were all rooting for him to win. As the various results came in, we found ways to spread the news during the show. My trusty pad of paper once again came in handy as I distributed the latest results. Best Book of a Musical, Avenue Q. Up next, Best Leading Actress in a Play, to my customers, who'd nod and smile and raise their glasses in tribute. Sadly, Jason lost to another very talented director, Joe Mantello, who directed Assassins. The award was given out during a quiet scene at the barricade, in which our rebels are resting and regrouping for another day of battle. I saw one of those rebels ever so subtly cast his gaze into the wings. An offstage cast member shook his head with regret and then, with a psycho expression on his face, aimed an imaginary gun. Understanding this to be the sign for assassins, the onstage rebel nodded sadly and began spreading the news. Okay, so now you know some of the secret goings-on of our one particular Broadway tour. The sinful pleasures that happen in the dark. These are the things they don't teach you about in acting school, and then again, neither do they teach you how to sing while dragging a dead body, and which two of us have to do nightly. I suppose that if there's any excuse, it's that when you do the same show night after night after night, you get a little numb, and maybe it's understandable that some of us from time to time might surrender to the silliness. Okay, some surrender nightly. Okay, fine, some, not I, aggressively look for opportunities to surrender. I guess messing around keeps them alert. Sometimes the crew gets involved, the stage managers, even musicians. I suppose they're fighting the numbness as well. But I think it should be noted that there's one group of people who are always excluded from that fun. The audience. The people for whom we do the show. The ones who paid the better part of $100 for each ticket, planned the evening, chose an outfit, hired a sitter, and came to the theater to experience a wonderful evening of entertainment. In my heart of hearts, I really believe those people deserve better. So while I myself have been guilty of breaking character and fooling around, I honestly don't approve of my own behavior on those occasions. It's like what St. Paul said about sin. That which I hate, that do I do. After all, none of us got into theater to not do the show, and surely there's much deeper satisfaction and fulfillment and joy to be found in actually investing in the story than there is in making our cohorts laugh. And what's more, incidentally, it's our job, the work that we are hired to do. I don't know what the proper balance is. No, that's a lie. Of course I do. We performers should always give the very best show we can every show. At the very least, we should aspire to do that. Personally, I'd like to demand more of myself. And adhere with firmer resolve to my own professional ethics, regardless of what's going on around me or how late it is in the week. The Brits have some great expressions for questionable onstage behavior. Jiggery-pokery is one of them. Literally, it means deceit, deception, slickness, and trickery. In theater, it means mugging, hamming, and overacting. It has nothing whatsoever to do with this chapter. I mention it only because it's fun to say. Try it. I'll wait. See? Jiggery-pokery, jiggery-pokery, jiggery-pokery. If you're not giggling yet, I don't know what to do with you. I give up. But there's another British expression, one that means breaking character and laughing during a performance, and this is the more damning one. They call it corpsing. It means that your character has died, ceased to exist. By laughing on stage, you've destroyed the world in which he lives. You've killed him. As much as we may enjoy onstage antics, they really do dishonor our art. Or dishonor with a U, as our friends across the pond would spell it. And yet, yes, there is still another side to this issue. Can the audience really tell? There are those in my cast who would argue that it makes no difference whether or not we're in character because the show works either way, and maybe they're right. There were many nights when, after putting in what I felt was a mediocre performance, I saw people weeping in the audience as they leapt to their feet. Grown men, cynical, way too cool-looking teens, old women, couples holding each other. These people had been profoundly affected, and that's very humbling. Wait, I think that's why they were weeping. Shit, maybe they just really hated my performance. I once heard a wonderful story about Laurence Olivier, who is considered by many to be the greatest actor in recent memory. Sir Larry was doing a production of Shakespeare's Titus Andronicus. In a review of his opening night performance, a local critic raved about a particular moment in which Titus tenderly bids farewell to his own hand before chopping it off. Olivier, according to the report, made a meal out of that moment, caressing his hand, kissing it, burying his head in it, holding it, even turning away from view and whispering inaudibly to it as if parting with a lover or a child. An amazing, riveting acting choice for him to have made. But as it turned out, it wasn't an acting choice at all. Upon hearing of the review, Sir Olivier revealed the truth. The chopping off of the beloved extremity effect was achieved with the help of some sort of mechanical apparatus attached to a fake hand. On opening night, this little contraption had gotten stuck somehow. In one version of the story, it was snagged on his costume, and Sir Larry was stalling for all he was worth while he tried to fix it unobtrusively. So what looked like kissing was the poor genius trying to pull at the thing with his teeth. And the context of those inaudible whispers, and this is just my own conjecture, may have been something along the lines of, "Son of a bitch, what the hell's the matter with this cursed thing?" Or maybe even, "I could have gone into medicine or finance, but no, I had to be a fucking actor." Well, that's what I would be muttering. Meanwhile, the audience sat, rapt, moved to silent tears by this stunning theatrical moment. I have no idea if the story is true, but I'd like to think it is. The reality is that the emotional impact of theater is sometimes achieved by accident and often achieved by the viewer, who will probably never realize the extent to which he, using his imagination, subconsciously projects, interprets, enhances, and repairs our feeble attempts. Sometimes good theater happens in spite of us, the players, and regardless of our esprit de corpses. Well, as you can see, I've had a lot of time on my hands here in Detroit to ponder these and other multi-sided questions. It makes for an interesting afternoon by the fire, safely tucked away in my great little hotel room, miles from the city, out on the road, somewhere in America, somewhere along my journey as a traveling theatrical. Now, about those Chinese dumplings. Kostroff. P.S. Jiggery-pokery. It never gets old. All right, friends. Next chapter, we go to a city that I had low expectations for that surprised me. So there's your little teaser to watch at least the first half. All right, friends. I'll see you next time. Bye.